Pei Jing was my personal guard. Yet when I was attacked, he instinctively sacrificed himself to shield my imperial sister. After my failed coup, I was driven off a cliff to my death by Pei Jing's arrow. In my second chance, Father Emperor let me choose my personal guard. I watched Pei Jing beaten bloody, then turned and selected another. Later, he broke into the princess's chambers at night, kneeling with a trembling voice to beg for punishment, Your Highness. Why did you not choose me? Main text, on the eve of Xinxian's ascension, she came to see me in prison. Her opulent elegance clashed starkly with the dimly lit dungeon. Had you wisely stepped aside sooner, sister, you wouldn't have suffered this fate. She looked down on me, her eyes filled with a pity that was as false as it was smug. I turned my head to glance behind Xinxian. In the dim light, a tall, slender silhouette was cast upon the wall, appearing even more imposing. I knew exactly who it was. Xinxian, I lowered my gaze, my expression a faint, mocking smile. Besides relying on men, what else can you do? Sister, there's no need to provoke me with such words. Xinxian glanced at the figure behind her, the amusement in her eyes deepening. She waved for him to leave first, then leaned closer, her voice soft enough for only my ears. My dearest imperial sister, do you know how I obtained your token? Before I could answer, she giggled softly. It was delivered to me personally by the man you've cherished for years. Oh, and I suppose you've never tasted his flavor, sister? What a pity. I wasn't surprised. That token had only ever been given to Pei Jing. And Pei Jing, my personal shadow guard, had betrayed me. Seeing my lack of anger, Xinxian lost interest. After a few more words, she left the prison with undisguised disgust. That night, my former subordinates attempted a prison break, only to be discovered by Pei Jing, who remained on guard outside. Cornered at the cliff's edge, it was Pei Jing who fired the final arrow. Your Highness! Yet as I plummeted over the precipice, I faintly heard his heart-wrenching scream. TSK. Truly nauseating. But when I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn. Jinner, see if any catch your eye? Mother held my hand, gesturing meaningfully at the line of youths before us. These will be your personal shadow guards. Don't be stubborn like you used to, choose carefully. Back to the day I selected my shadow guards. Rows of youths clad in black combat attire stood before me. Throughout history, every imperial prince and princess received personal bodyguards upon coming of age, and now it was my turn to select mine. My mother feared my tendency to judge people solely by their looks would resurface, hence her special reminder. I understand, Mother. Regaining my composure, I scanned the youths before me and immediately spotted Pei Jing. He truly possessed an exquisite face. Especially after being punished the night before, his pallid complexion only accentuated his more upright bearing. In my previous life, that old habit of mine flared up again. I instantly set my sights on Pei Jing. After that, I treated him exceptionally well, keeping him by my side daily, even when his personal protection wasn't required. In my youth, I merely admired his appearance, but later, I truly fell for him. Yet Pei Jing betrayed me. Though he was my personal guard, during the assassination attempt, he instinctively shielded Xinxian with his own body. Xinxian? I froze, noticing keenly that though Pei Jing remained expressionless before me, his peripheral vision kept drifting toward the same spot. Following his gaze, I spotted Xinxian standing beside the emperor. TSK. So he'd been after Xinxian from the start, and I'd been the one to break them apart. A cold laugh rose in my chest, mingled with nausea. Have you found anyone you like? Noticing my glance, the emperor finally lifted his head and asked meaningfully. But before I could answer, he lowered his gaze to Xinxian. And what about you, Xianer? Is there anyone you fancy? Today was clearly my day to select my personal guards. At my father's words, even my mother, usually composed and dignified, couldn't help but change her expression. Today is third sister's turn to choose first. Xianer dares not overstep. I watched Xinshan glance briefly in Pei Jing's direction before quickly lowering her head and replying in a soft voice. Her demeanor delighted the emperor greatly. He declared that if she saw someone she liked, she might choose first without hesitation. Mother's face turned ashen. I silently patted her hand to comfort her, then let my gaze drift past Pei Jing to rest on the last man standing. Compared to the previous shadow guards, this man appeared noticeably scruffy. His face was covered in unkempt stubble, obscuring his true features. He stood there with a slouch, hardly resembling a shadow guard at all. Yet, his amber eyes were clear and pure, carrying a hint of amusement whenever he looked at someone. Could he be a fake guard? I wondered inwardly, yet instinctively started toward him. But before I took a few steps, my sleeve was yanked. It was Pei Jing. He raised his hand almost reflexively, yet his expression was unusually blank as he did so. "Your Highness," he called softly, tightening his grip. "How dare you?" Before he could finish, I frowned in disgust. "Who gave you permission to touch me?" "Your Highness, the dagger." The last man promptly handed over a dagger. Without waiting for Pei Jing to release me, I flicked my wrist and severed his sleeve. "Your Highness!" Pei Jing's eyes widened in shock. But before he could react, the leader of the dark guard standing nearby struck him with brutal force. The spiked whip lashed him until blood dripped freely, yet Pei Jing remained silent, his gaze stubbornly fixed on me. How peculiar. I couldn't be bothered. Turning away, I strode directly toward the man who had handed me the dagger earlier. Behind me, Xinshan had already begun pleading for Pei Jing's mercy. I curled my lip, lifting my gaze to meet the man's. Only upon drawing near did I realize how toweringly tall he was when standing upright. I took a few uncomfortable steps back and asked, "What is your name?" "Wei Ji." I hadn't noticed before, but his voice was clear and resonant, the kind I'd find pleasing. Yet the name itself felt vaguely familiar. I couldn't place it immediately, but I didn't dwell on it. Pointing at Wei Ji, I addressed my mother, "Then I shall have him." The moment the words left my lips, Pei Jing, who had been kneeling before us, turned ashen white. I had a dream. Or rather, it was something from my past life. After my failed coup, Xinshan first confined me to the cold palace. The cold palace was remote, and the palace folk were accustomed to flattering the powerful and trampling the weak. Back then, they especially wanted nothing to do with me. Thus, my 3 daily meals were delivered by a young eunuch. Sometimes, that young eunuch would chat with me through the wall. He said his name was Wei Ji. Wei Ji? I jolted awake. Outside the hall, night rain fell as thunder roared. Without pausing to put on shoes, I rushed out. Wei Ji, the words caught in my throat. Frowning, I stared at the figure kneeling outside my chambers. The downpour had soaked his clothes through, mingling with blood that trickled down. Wei Ji stood beside him, sword in hand. His eyes lit up when he saw me emerge, only to dim almost instantly. His voice trembled, bordering on a plea, "Your Highness. Why not choose me?" This scene felt eerily familiar. Back when the imperial retreat was attacked, Xinshan had stood beside me. Though she was a princess trained in martial arts, she had been so flustered at that moment that she clutched my sleeve tightly, calling me third imperial sister in a soft, vulnerable voice. The retreat was heavily guarded, with strict security. Yet one assassin slipped through the guards, dagger raised to strike Xinshan. I instinctively tried to pull her away, but she yanked me back, halting me for a split second. This pause gave the assassin the chance to close the distance. Pei Jing, who had been engaged by several attackers, scrambled free and rushed to shield us. But the assassin was cunning. He flicked his sleeve crossbow, unleashing a volley of bolts at me. Somehow, Xinshan's grip on my sleeve had loosened. Pei Jing shielded me behind him, his body a solid barrier. As the bolt struck me, I saw Pei Jing's panicked face as he tried to rush forward to catch me. Behind me, Xinxian still wore that unshakable smug smile. Afterward, Pei Jing was punished for failing to protect his master, confined in the dark bureau's water dungeon for 3 days and nights. The night he emerged, the storm raged just as fiercely. Pei Jing knelt before my palace hall in the same manner, the downpour lashing against his untreated wounds. Blood and rainwater mingled, pooling at his feet. I asked him, "Did you know Xinxian has her own secret guards protecting her?" The emperor cherished the imperial consort deeply. Thus, among all the imperial princes and princesses, Xinxian was the most favored. And the shadow guard by Xinxian's side was none other than one of the most formidable shadow guards who had once served by the emperor's side. I saw Pei Jing's body tremble slightly. This man, even as he knelt wounded and drenched in rain, kept his back perfectly straight. Wei Ji couldn't suppress a slight tremor in his hand, causing the wound on Pei Jing's neck to deepen. Got startled, my apologies. Wei Ji glanced over and casually remarked, "Our young prince is still a child. He often jokes around when speaking. Don't take it to heart, brother. Even as a ghost, don't haunt our young prince." It was unclear which word had provoked Pei Jing. His eyes burned crimson, his chest heaving with intense emotion. He snapped, "If I were an assassin, His Highness would be in danger right now. Wei Ji, you deliberately let me break in, yet now you put on this show before His Highness. A shadow guard's duty is to clear all threats for his master, but you only cared about toying with me, disregarding His Highness's safety. What right do you have to talk about protecting him?" TSK. Such righteous indignation. I almost felt like applauding this man. Pity he's a thoroughly depraved individual at his core. The figure kneeling on the ground gradually overlapped with the memory of the man who shot me with an arrow that day. I narrowed my eyes at him for a moment, then suddenly laughed. I asked him, "What is your name?" "Pei Jing." "Pei Jing, is it?" I nodded with a smile, then slowly let the laughter fade from my face. "You're just a lowly shadow guard. What right do you have to question whom this palace chooses to protect? What is your name?" "Pei Jing." "Pei Jing. Well then, from now on, you shall be the one I protect." Pei Jing stared at me in disbelief, the color draining from his face. His gaze was filled with sorrow, piercing through the rain as if solid, landing squarely on me. I remained smiling, but this time I addressed Wei Ji, "Why haven't you acted? Do you intend for me to do it myself?" Wei Ji scratched his chin and nodded. But just as he moved to strike, Pei Jing finally collapsed, unconscious. Then I heard him snort, deliberately loud enough for me to catch, weaker than a woman. "How did you even become a secret guard? How are you supposed to protect your master?" Then he looked up at me with an unusually earnest and kind expression. "Your Highness, how about we just poke a few holes in him? After all, he's now a shadow guard by the 7th princess's side." I pondered for a few seconds, finding Wei Ji's suggestion rather brilliant. I even felt a surge of excitement, tempted to take matters into my own hands. But in the end, I didn't succeed. Because Xinxian arrived. I watched her being hurriedly escorted in by a group of people. Rainwater drenched the hem of her expensive crane-patterned robe, yet she paid it no mind. "Third imperial sister." Xinxian gasped slightly. She spread her arms to shield Pei Jing, her face betraying unmasked anxiety. "Don't hurt him." At this moment, Xinxian hadn't yet undergone her coming-of-age ceremony. Her features were tender and innocent, radiating an air of untouched naivety. Yet this very person had seen through my years of pretense, then, as if foreseeing it all, meticulously prepared countermeasures for every step I might take. So I turned my head to look at her, a smile playing on my lips. "Very well. But 7th sister, you'd best keep a close eye on that dog by your side. Make sure he doesn't run loose and bite people." Xinxian bit her lower lip, her expression briefly flushing with embarrassment. Truthfully, I never held Xinxian in high regard. Even when my coup failed, I was imprisoned, and she ascended to the world's most exalted throne, I still didn't think much of her. Yet I was genuinely curious, how had this person uncovered my ambition? All knew that Xinxian, the third princess of the Great Feng dynasty, was licentious and tyrannical, capricious and spoiled, the most worthless among the imperial princes and princesses. Even my own mother held this view. She would often tap my forehead, her expression a mix of resignation and relief. At least you have your elder brother, the crown prince, to protect you. Yet the crown prince brother who should have protected me perished in that infamous witchcraft scandal. My father felt guilty, so he indulged my capriciousness even more. Even my mother, overcome with grief, neglected to discipline me. It wasn't until my younger brother was born that my mother finally emerged from her sorrow. But by then, my reputation was already ruined beyond repair. Yet only Xinxian, only she asked my father with the most innocent expression, third imperial sister and eldest brother share the same mother. How could their personalities differ so greatly? Moreover, I've heard that in her younger years, she was often praised by the grand tutor for her brilliant intellect. Father, what has happened to third imperial sister? Then, when everyone was hurling insults at me, she stepped forward and spoke for me with righteous indignation. You say third sister is willful and spoiled, but has she ever done anything truly heinous? You're all a bunch of rumor mongers, here to ruin third sister's reputation, utterly despicable. Thus, Xinxian earned a good reputation. But I became a thorn in Father Emperor's side. When he was still crown prince, he had an imperial sister who surpassed him in every way. Whenever people spoke of that eldest princess, they could only sigh, if only she weren't a woman. If only she weren't a woman became almost an obsession for Father Emperor. Thus, almost immediately after ascending the throne, he decreed that the eldest princess be married to a weak and useless prince consort. Later, when her Highness took up residence in a temple to cultivate her spirit, only then did my father find some peace of mind. It was laughable, really. He reveled in the comfort women provided, yet feared even the slightest display of their abilities. Even when that woman was his own daughter. These men believed women were born to kneel beneath men. Thus, when he later witnessed my indulgence in frivolous pleasures, though he would outwardly rebuke me, his tone held no trace of genuine reproach. What Xinxian did was to pluck that thorn from my father's heart once more. I did indeed find myself increasingly intrigued by Xinxian at that time. I wanted to see just how far she would go to deal with me. Open and covert struggles among imperial princes and princesses were commonplace. I saw nothing wrong with Xinxian focusing her attention on me, a useless princess. Yet the reality proved a profound disappointment. All Xinxian could do was rely on her innate charms to bewitch the men around her. Then exploit them to achieve her own ends. It was peculiar indeed, every man who met Xinxian became utterly obsessed with her. Even Pei Jing was no exception. The secret guards trained by the dark service since childhood were fiercely loyal to their masters, with no precedent of betrayal. But Pei Jing was the sole exception. He became Xinxian's pawn placed beside me, delivering the fatal blow. Later, Xinxian's gaze toward me held a hint of pity and mockery, as if she were observing an ant utterly incapable of resistance. She seemed convinced she was the ultimate victor. And I was destined to be nothing more than a stepping stone. The victor takes all, defeat is defeat, and I have no words to argue. Yet I still despised Xinxian. Yet I still would fight this sky, this fate, one more time. Perhaps those words from that day had struck a nerve with Xinxian. After that night, I never saw Pei Jing again. Secret guards were meant to remain in the shadows. When Pei Jing was by my side before, it was only his pleasing face that made him unique. Now, the one who stands alone beside me is Wei Ji. But it's not because of his face. I glanced at Wei Ji's unkempt, bearded face, a stark contrast to my own aesthetic preferences, and couldn't help but avert my gaze in pain. What brings you to seek this palace again? Is it not my duty to guard the young prince's safety at all times? Wei Ji declared with righteous indignation. I have told you before, you are the one I protect. There is no need to risk your life for me. Merely keep me company. I had spoken these words to Pei Jing as well. Back then, though Pei Jing remained silent, a flicker of humiliation had flickered in his eyes. But the moment the words left my lips, something felt off. And Wei Ji's gaze instantly turned strange. He paused, pointing incredulously at his own face. Your Highness could actually stomach looking at this face? Wei Ji truly didn't seem like a proper shadow guard from the Secret Service. He spoke with his usual carefree attitude. So I turned my head, and while he wasn't looking, I playfully tugged at his beard, studying him closely. Only when Wei Ji's smile faded and his entire body stiffened did I finally speak with feigned seriousness. Your bone structure seems quite good to me. Shave off that beard, and I imagine I could manage to nibble on you too. Wei Ji was rendered speechless. His body remained rigid, his eyes darting about nervously. But I noticed the earlobe hidden beneath his hair was flushed a crimson so vivid it seemed ready to bleed. This only deepened my curiosity about just how old Wei Ji truly was. In my previous life, I knew Wei Ji when he was already a young eunuch. Though I never understood why a royal prince's personal guard would end up castrated and serving as a eunuch, I imagined he must have been quite old by then and endured much suffering. Thinking of this, I glanced at Wei Ji's lower body and casually asked, how old? The senses of a shadow guard are incredibly sharp. I watched as every inch of his exposed skin flushed a deep crimson. It was truly astonishing. But before I could fully marvel at it, he asked me, his voice strained with embarrassment yet utterly earnest, is the monthly salary for being a young prince's bedchamber attendant higher than that of a personal shadow guard? After thoughtful consideration, I replied, naturally. We locked eyes, and all that remained was, then let's begin. Wei Ji tore open his outer robe, bellowing hoarsely, as long as your Highness rewards me generously, I'll do anything. Not just my body, I'd even rip out my heart for you, your Highness. Nothing but terror. I instantly released the hand tugging at Wei Ji's beard, pointing expressionlessly toward the palace entrance, get out. Wei Ji rolled away with a grin. Before leaving, he muttered to himself, oh, I finally got to see your Highness angry. A young lady of your age ought to get angry and throw tantrums more often, that's perfectly normal. I froze, vaguely recalling someone whispering similar words in my ear before. Why is Jinjin so well behaved? That won't do. A young lady should be free to throw wild tantrums. Even if she becomes utterly unreasonable. What's there to fear? Your imperial brother will bear the blame for you, I am the crown prince. It's sister. Fine, it's sister. But Jinjin, from now on, you must only whisper that name when we're alone. Don't let anyone else hear it. In my memory, that sister with the bright smile was slowly fading from my recollections. She was my sister, not my imperial brother. Yet few knew this truth. Even those who did were on the verge of forgetting it. Not even her own mother remembered. Not even she herself. And yet, such a free-spirited soul met her end in a filthy mess. Worse still, a disheveled concubine wept beside her corpse, claiming the crown prince had made advances toward her while drunk. Indecent advances? Absolutely preposterous. She was merely a young woman forced to forget her true identity for over a decade, all because of her birth mother's ambition. Yet no one cleared her name, nor dared to do so. If word spread that the crown prince was a woman, it would unleash a storm of bloodshed. So her own mother personally set the fire, then blamed it on witchcraft. That day, the flames blazed so fiercely they nearly blinded me. But I forced myself to watch the fire extinguished, watch the ruins lie utterly desolate. My elder sister lived with integrity and possessed the talent to govern. She should have been a wise ruler. Yet in the end, she was slandered with baseless accusations, denied even peace in death. That day, Mother held me and wept, murmuring over and over in my ear, if only she hadn't been a girl. If only she hadn't been a girl. I stood there, silent. Mother believed her scheme was flawless. But in my past life, when Father died, he told me himself, he knew my sister was a girl. Lying on the dragon bed, half paralyzed, he still forced himself upright, raising his trembling hand to point at me. Perhaps mistaking me for my sister, my father's face twisted into a hideous grimace as he uttered each word, "A woman deserves death." Simply because women cannot enter the imperial court, simply because women cannot achieve military glory, because women cannot be crown princes, because women cannot stand above men. I hadn't thought of these memories in a long time. Now, because of Wei Ji's words, they've stirred up so many absurd and laughable recollections. So you see, sister, how harshly this world judges women. But I refuse to believe in such superstition. I will, for you and for all women under heaven, vindicate our rightful place. After that day, rumors spread throughout the palace that I had taken a fancy to my personal shadow guard, even that I had forced myself upon him. Such rumors existed in my past life too, though they weren't mere rumors then. I didn't care much about them. But when I met Wei Ji's bashful, timid gaze, I couldn't help but want to strike him. Because of this, Father Emperor summoned me specifically to question me. Upon hearing I was indeed interested in this guard, his expression grew complex, yet he said little. But he clearly looked relieved. Not long after, Mother summoned me to her chambers. She watched me finish the calming soup as usual. After exhaling a breath of stale air without showing it, she asked me casually, "Have you truly taken a liking to that man?" "Indeed, Mother. Seeing his robust physique, he must possess extraordinary abilities." I answered with a cheerful smile. "Oh, you." Mother scolded playfully, her expression softening into a smile. "Very well, as you wish. After all, you are a princess, no one dares criticize you. Moreover, you have a crown prince younger brother who will protect you in the future." Oh, and the Grand Tutor recently praised Xian's studies again. Like any ordinary mother, she held my hand and chatted about my imperial brother. Ever since Shenxian was named crown prince, Mother seemed to have returned to her former self. She appeared to have forgotten she had another daughter, one who died unjustly because of her own ambition. I listened with a smile, then after a while pretended to grow impatient and clamored to go out and play. So Mother scolded me a few times, "You're so lazy, not half as good as your brother," before waving me off. Wei Ji was waiting outside the inner palace. He had a blade of grass he'd found somewhere tucked between his teeth, arms crossed as he leaned against the wall. Though he was clearly a cold-blooded, ruthless shadow guard, he was surprisingly well-liked. Passing palace servants would greet him cheerfully. They even chatted with him without restraint. "You mean the young princess? Of course she likes me, she wants to see me every single day. My looks aren't up to par? Superficial. Utterly superficial." Is the young princess the type to judge solely by looks? Even when he saw Shenxian leading Pei Jing toward the central palace, Wei Ji deliberately raised his voice. "The young princess specifically instructed that I'm the one she protects, different from the other secret guards. I only need to accompany her." I saw Pei Jing's eyelashes flutter slightly as he lifted his gaze to look at Wei Ji as if he were a corpse. But Pei Jing didn't move. He stood quietly beside Shenxian, just as he used to stand beside me. So I called out to the maid who was about to leave and hid in the shadows. The palace attendants bowed to Shenxian. Yet Shenxian was clearly more interested in Wei Ji. So she proactively asked Wei Ji about me, then casually remarked at the end, "It's a pity third imperial sister's affection is always so fleeting." "That's how it is with others," Wei Ji replied, still wearing that same cheerful expression, not a hint of change. "The young princess treats me differently." His voice was loud enough for me to hear clearly, and I could only think to sneer coldly. "Yes, I treat him differently. If not for the debt of a few meals from my past life, I would have long since stripped this future little eunuch naked and thrown him out, making him thoroughly humiliated before everyone." I rolled my eyes, my gaze settling on Pei Jing standing nearby. He stood there with a cold expression. Yet the veins bulging on the back of his hand, pressed against his sword hilt, betrayed his thoughts. I knew Pei Jing had been reborn. I'd assumed he was smitten with Xinxian, and after returning to this life, he'd surely reveal all my secrets to her. But after waiting several days, Xinxian showed no sign of action. She even seemed to be losing her composure. And his actions that day? He was putting on this whole act of being deeply in love with me, only to have his heart broken by me. TSK. How disgusting. So I stepped out. What's this? Seventh princess has taken a fancy to this little guard of mine? Well, that won't do, I said, my hand sliding affectionately around Wei Ji's waist, a playful smile on my lips. I haven't had my fill of fun yet. Besides, the one by your side looks more handsome. It's just a pity I only fancy the more muscular types these days. I deliberately let out a few TSK sounds, my hand still resting on Wei Ji's waist without moving. Then, when no one was paying attention, I pinched him hard several times. Wei Ji stiffened, his mouth closing as his expression grew even more impassive. Third imperial sister, don't speak nonsense. Xinxian frowned. Jing is only responsible for protecting me. Yes, 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 I nodded dismissively. Seventh imperial sister has always been pure as jade. I was just speaking recklessly. At these words, a fleeting look of surprise crossed Xinxian's face. Not wanting to engage further, I turned to lead Wei Ji away. But Xinxian suddenly bit her lip and called out to me. Father has bestowed the shadow guards from his personal retinue upon me. I halted, thinking I already knew this. Did she intend to flaunt it to me? But Xinxian's next words made me raise an eyebrow in surprise. She said, I've heard Wei Ji's abilities among his fellow shadow guards are not particularly outstanding. Third imperial sister is short-staffed. Why not let me send Pei Jing to her instead, to protect her? As Xinxian spoke these words, her tone carried an urgency she herself hadn't noticed. I'd long suspected Xinxian possessed some form of foresight. She seemed to anticipate every move I made, preparing countermeasures in advance. Yet in this rebirth, she appeared to have lost her grip on me. Uncertain, I decided to observe further. So I feigned surprise. Would seventh sister truly bear to part with such a treasure? The safety of third sister is more important. You know I've never cared for such things. I only desire to die beneath peonies, to be a ghost of unrestrained passion. Xinxian seemed to exhale in relief. Then she smiled and offered, if Jing's appearance is truly first-rate, and if your highness finds him to your liking, I have no such inclination. I cut Xinxian off, my smile still in place. Yet each word was laced with chill. I am a delicate creature by nature. I never touch things others have used. I find them unclean. As I uttered these final words, I turned my gaze to Pei Jing, my eyes crinkling with amusement. Pei Jing froze. His lips turned deathly pale, his body swaying as if he could barely stand. My reputation for loving beauty was well known. Even the palace attendants serving me had to possess some degree of charm. Thus, rumors spread that I kept numerous male favorites within the palace. I decided to play along. A woman keeping so many men was despised by the world. Pei Jing believed it. So when I first took him into my service, his eyes held nothing but shame and disgust. Truthfully, I felt quite hurt and wronged at first, even considering a severe lesson for Pei Jing. But during that first attempt, my men lost control of their strength, and I saw the scar on Pei Jing's chest. So I had to call it off. What could I do? This man had saved my life when he was young, and nearly lost his own in the process. My elder sister once said, life matters far more than pride. So I held my tongue for the time being, thinking that time would reveal his true character. Perhaps this little shadow guard would change his opinion of me? But instead of a change of heart, all I got was Pei Jing calling me filthy. I vaguely recall it was on Pei Jing's birthday. Since it was his first birthday spent by my side, I took pleasure in carving him a small wooden sword myself, waiting only for him to add the red tassel. I intended to deliver it personally, but was delayed by other matters. So I casually summoned a palace attendant to carry it over. The attendant delivering it was somewhat attractive, and perhaps this led to a misunderstanding on Pei Jing's part. Later, the little wooden sword was returned. The messenger reported that Pei Jing had said his status was too lowly to accept such a gift. But Shi Luo, who grew up with me, was beside herself with anger, shouting, "I clearly saw that heartless bastard say the wooden sword was filthy. The object wasn't unclean. He merely despised the filth of its maker." So I forced myself to think of the scar on Pei Jing's chest, and once again, survival trumped pride. After that incident, I never again gave Pei Jing any handmade trinkets of my own. But I remained kind to Pei Jing. During the day, Shenxian failed to send Pei Jing away. Though I knew she'd have other tricks up her sleeve, I never imagined she'd stoop to such absurd lengths. Days later, seeing Pei Jing, dressed up specially and brought to my bedchamber, I thought, of course. It's only natural I look down on Shenxian. A first-rate shadow guard trained by the esteemed Dark Command, yet you're content to come serve as a mere bedwarmer for this palace? I shook my head in feigned astonishment, keeping my distance. If your leader ever found out, he'd surely consider you a disgrace to his training. Pei Jing had always held that leader in high regard. But this time, I was wrong. Not a trace of shame or anger flashed across Pei Jing's face. He merely fixed me with a dark, intense gaze before slowly approaching. His clothing was thin, and the scar faintly visible as he moved marred the beauty of his form. Yet Pei Jing seemed certain that seeing that scar would change my perception of him. So I did as he wished, my gaze fixed on that scar as the smile on my face gradually faded. I saw Pei Jing visibly relax. He had almost abandoned all his dignity and pride, kneeling before me, attempting to learn the flattery techniques of those palace servants he once looked down upon. He said, "Your Highness, I am not unclean." His voice trembled as he spoke, yet it carried an almost imperceptible edge of madness. Seeing my silence, the light in his eyes seemed to grow brighter, bit by bit. "If your Highness requires it, I could also." I severed Pei Jing's loosely tied sash with my dagger, cutting off his unfinished words. Thus, that scar was laid bare before me, completely exposed. I lifted my gaze to meet Pei Jing's eyes, then smiled at him. "How ugly." Pei Jing froze, as if unable to believe it. So I repeated it cheerfully, "That scar on your body is truly ugly." The words barely left my lips when the dagger in my hand swiftly plunged into Pei Jing's chest, stopping mere inches from his heart. It was the exact spot where Pei Jing's arrow had struck him in my previous life. Gripping the dagger, I slowly pushed it deeper, twisting it without hesitation through the flesh. Warm blood trickled onto the back of my hand. I glanced at it and sneered lightly, "So filthy." Though Pei Jing showed no flicker of pain when the dagger pierced him, those 2 words alone twisted his face into agony, his expression bordering on madness. He instinctively reached to grab my hand, but froze mid-motion at my next words. I leaned closer to Pei Jing, speaking softly, enunciating each syllable. "I told you, Pei Jing. If there is a next time, I will take your life with my own hands." Those words alone were enough to extinguish the last glimmer of light in Pei Jing's eyes. He tilted his head back slightly, staring at me. After a long moment, he forced a smile that felt unnatural. He said, "How wonderful, your Highness has returned." Earlier, Pei Jing had accused Wei Ji of putting on airs. But I found his current demeanor utterly hypocritical. Thinking this, I blurted it out. Perhaps having been pricked by my words too often, Pei Jing now merely gasped for breath a few times before quickly regaining his composure. He bowed his head almost humbly, about to speak, when the doors to my bedchamber were violently kicked open. Accompanied by Wei Ji's increasingly furious voice, "Which shameless dog of a servant dares to poach my corner while I'm away?" I thought to myself, clearly I'd been giving Wei Ji too much leeway lately, this brat's audacity was growing by the day. Just as I turned to retort, my gaze locked on the intruder and I froze. Wait, who is this young man with the baby-faced appearance? But Pei Jing's reaction was even more extreme. He almost instinctively tried to stand up and block my view of Wei Ji. His voice was panicked, Your Highness, don't look at him. But this man had been punished several times since his rebirth, and now he'd been stabbed hard by me. He'd lost too much blood and stumbled, nearly losing his balance. So I heard Wei Ji's usual snark again, weaker than a woman? How did you even become a shadow guard? Wei Ji stormed in, looking determined to catch someone in the act. But his stride slowed with every step. By the time he stood before me, he seemed rather flustered, yet he still stiffened his neck to demand, "What are you staring at, Your Highness?" "I was admiring how your face does indeed possess a certain charm that might tempt this palace to take a bite." I mused aloud, thinking it was no wonder he usually hid his features behind a beard. I expected that remark to make Wei Ji blush like usual, followed by his usual playful lecture about how a prince shouldn't judge people by their looks alone. But this time, Wei Ji merely glared at me with a strange look and snorted coldly. I knew it. Stunned into silence, I finally pointed at Pei Jing with a wooden expression, an assassination attempt in my bedchamber. "Wei Ji, this is your second failure to protect your sovereign. Do you know your crime? Assassination?" Wei Ji sneered coldly. "More like a beauty's dagger turned into a ghost of romance?" I grew increasingly certain I'd been far too lenient with Wei Ji lately. Before I could even raise my voice in anger, he crouched down, intending to hoist Pei Jing out with one hand. But as he reached, he froze. "Huh? How come you have a scar here too?" After saying that, Wei Ji even reached back to touch his own chin, deep in thought. Could it be that all skilled and handsome secret guards must bear a scar upon their chest? Wei Ji has a scar too? I froze, my body reacting faster than my mind as I yanked open his robe. Caught off guard by this sudden action, he immediately let out a shrill yelp. "Your Highness, I know you're impatient, but I don't have a habit of exposing myself in public, I ignored him, my eyes fixed unwaveringly on the knife scar across Wei Ji's chest, slashing from the upper left, down to his waist, piercing through his heart. I am not actually the biological daughter of the current empress. My mother gave birth to me in the cold palace. She had hoped bearing a prince would free her from confinement, but instead delivered a daughter. Thus, I nearly died at birth, saved only by an old wet nurse. Yet my days in the cold palace remained harsh. Rebels rose across the land that year. Bandits stormed the palace seeking an assassination, only to flee to the cold palace after their defeat. Naturally, these bandits spared none of the elderly, weak, or infirm within the cold palace. In her panic, my mother grabbed me and thrust me before her, begging the bandits to spare her. Perhaps the bandit found her actions despicable, for the blade he swung missed me and struck that woman instead. I watched as she was cut in two, warm blood splattering onto my face. Yet I remained expressionless. "Let her die before you. At least you can die with peace in your heart." No sooner had the words left his mouth than he raised his blade again. But I did not die. Because someone stood before me. He appeared to be only 8 or 9 years old, clad in black martial attire with a white eagle embroidered on his sleeve. The old nurse had told me that the emperor had established the secret service, training a group of shadow guards to protect the imperial princes and princesses. White signified a rookie guard, newly recruited to the secret service. Yet this child stood before me, entangled in a deadly struggle with the bandit. He possessed some skill, and the bandit had already been wounded when he entered the cold palace. Thus, at the cost of a blade piercing his own chest, the young guard thrust his sword into the bandit's heart. But the bandit wasn't truly dead, merely temporarily incapacitated. The young guard himself wasn't in great shape either. I remained silent. Then I picked up the sword he dropped, gripped it with both hands, and thrust it repeatedly into the bandit. Until the young guard chuckled and reminded me, "Your Highness, he couldn't be any more dead." That was the first time I had ever killed someone. My sword-wielding hand still trembled, and only then did the fear sink in. The young guard laboriously pulled out a small wooden sword and tossed it to me. "That thing's too heavy. Your Highness is still young. Play with this instead." I caught it instinctively with both hands. The sword tassel, preserved for so long its color had grown dull, swayed gently in the night breeze. I walked over in silence, staring at the bloody scar on his chest, my throat parched. There's no medicine in the cold palace. MHM. You're dying. I won't die. The young guard's features had been altered. Thus, even after losing so much blood, his complexion remained unblemished. Only his eyes brimmed with laughter, bright as a star-filled sky. He repeated himself, I won't die, Your Highness. I'm still waiting for you to grow up and come find me to be your personal guard. I thought he was losing his mind. Setting aside whether I'd ever be qualified to choose my own shadow guard, I wasn't even sure I'd survive. So I turned and walked back. But at the very least, this little shadow guard who once gave me a few steamed buns, who stayed with me to watch the night sky several times, and who just saved my life now, he couldn't die. Yet when I returned with the medicine I'd painstakingly gathered, he was already gone. Where he had been sitting, a line of crooked characters remained. I couldn't read, so I could only memorize the shapes of those characters. Such commotion in the cold palace naturally caught the emperor's attention. That's how they discovered a young princess had been hidden away in this forgotten place. I was brought out of the cold palace and placed under the empress's care. I learned to read, and then I understood what the little guard had written that day. Your Highness, remember to come find me. So later, I truly went to find him. But it seemed I had found the wrong person. Wei Ji was still clamoring to move to another location to continue. He couldn't let Pei Jing see everything, that would be a loss for him. Yet, upon noticing the expression on my face, Wei Ji's voice grew quieter and quieter. Your Highness, are you angry? His carefree demeanor vanished, replaced by palpable awkwardness. He glanced at Pei Jing, lost in thought, then gritted his teeth. Pulling his robe around me, he lowered his head and whispered, Your Highness, if you truly crave me, just take a quiet little nibble. We won't let anyone see. His tone was like coaxing a child. But the words themselves were utterly improper. I pushed his face away expressionlessly. I'd intended to speak calmly with him, but when I opened my mouth, my voice trembled uncontrollably. You lied to me. You promised to let me find you to be my personal guard, but you weren't even there. I'd been wrong once before. But for some reason, this time I was certain Wei Ji was the one I was meant to find. Wei Ji didn't catch on, looking puzzled. What did I lie about, Your Highness? I ignored him, tilting my head to meet those amber eyes and asking again, what happened to your eyes? I remembered Wei Ji's eyes had been black back then. Those eyes always reminded me of the most dazzling night sky I'd seen in the cold palace. Wei Ji's gaze immediately darted away. He fidgeted uncomfortably, scratching his nose and mumbled something about accidentally ingesting some unknown herb while testing medicines. His words suddenly made me notice the faint medicinal scent lingering on him. A sudden realization struck me, my breath catching. You became a medicinal test subject? Those subjected to such trials, immersed year after year in various herbs and poisons, undergo physical transformations. They become immune to all toxins, and their blood can counteract any poison. I'd heard rumors that the Secret Service had once attempted to train a squad of medicinal test subjects as secret guards, but suffered heavy losses. And Wei Ji instinctively turned his head away. He looked at the sky, at the ground, at Pei Jing, anywhere but at me, still stubbornly insisting, what medicine man? I've never even heard of such a thing. But this man was simply too bad at lying. So I glanced at Pei Jing. He seemed to sense something and lifted his head, meeting my gaze with an expression that held defeat, pain, and struggle. And a despair that had lost all hope. My heart trembled, and a detail suddenly struck me. Wei Ji, I called his name, lower your head. Wei Ji instinctively bowed his head. What is the young prince doing? I grabbed Wei Ji's hair and peered behind his ear. There was a tiny red mole. It was hardly noticeable, yet now it seemed to burn my eyes. That night I was rescued from prison, I was actually quite confused myself. Because nearly all my former subordinates had been slaughtered by Shenxian. The few survivors had been ordered by me not to come and risk their lives. Yet that night, a man claiming to be from my old unit came to break me out. I'd been poisoned by Shenxian and was weak. So he slit his palm and coaxed me to drink his blood. Drink this, and the pain will stop. His face was disfigured, his voice hoarse and unpleasant, yet when he coaxed me to drink his blood, he was utterly gentle. He also produced a small wooden sword I had once made myself, intended as a birthday gift for Pei Jing. Dark red tassels hung from the sword's hilt. But he merely waved it before me briefly, then swiftly withdrew it, guarding it carefully against his heart. "Your Highness," he said, "it's time for us to go home." And so, carried in his arms, I left the prison. Under the night sky, I caught a faint glimpse of a red mole behind his ear. Yet in the end, he broke his promise. He failed to bring me home. He fell on the path blocking Pei Jing. "Your Highness," the blood-soaked man gave me one last brilliant smile, "walk forward boldly. Do not fear." His hands still clutched Pei Jing tightly, only to be broken one by one. So he used every moving part of his body to block Pei Jing. And so I ran forward without looking back, running until I nearly suffocated, my throat filled with the taste of blood. But Pei Jing still caught me. Truthfully, the moment I leaped off the cliff, a sense of relief washed over me. I even thought, perhaps I'd soon meet that ugly little thing who died before me. Then I'd ask him, who exactly he was. I never imagined it would be Wei Ji. Yet somehow, this answer didn't feel entirely unexpected. "Your Highness? Your Highness?" In my past life, the little eunuch Wei Ji always addressed me as Your Highness when attending to me. Only Wei Ji dared to call me that. Yet that night, he had only called me Highness. He didn't want me to recognize him, so each utterance of Highness was respectful yet distant. "Your Highness." A rough hand touched my cheek, yet hesitated, afraid to intrude further. "Please don't cry. I know I'm not the most handsome, but surely I didn't scare you to tears?" Wei Ji was genuinely flustered. He fumbled around his clothes, desperately searching for a handkerchief, but what rough-and-tumble fellow carries one? So he gritted his teeth and yanked my sleeve instead. "My fabric is coarse, Your Highness, and your skin is delicate. Use this to wipe your tears for now." I nearly laughed in exasperation at Wei Ji. Seeing this fool actually trying to tear my sleeve to wipe my tears, I quickly snatched my arm back and roughly wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I'm not that delicate," I snorted coldly. "My hand will do just fine." Wei Ji scratched his face awkwardly. But I distinctly heard him mutter under his breath, "But I wish Your Highness were more delicate." My breath caught, and the suppressed emotions from earlier threatened to surge back. Frustrated and embarrassed, I lashed out, kicking Wei Ji hard. "Wei Ji, you lied to me again. How could I dare to deceive you?" Wei Ji dramatically clutched his foot and hopped around, protesting loudly. Yet his amber eyes sparkled with a mischievous, intoxicating smile. Suddenly, Wei Ji's words from that day came back to me. Well, I finally get to see the young prince's angry face. A girl of this age should get angry and throw tantrums more often, that's perfectly normal. This man truly is unrestrained. Bold and reckless. I pressed my lips together, feeling heat rise to my eyes while the skin behind my ears burned. So I turned my gaze to Pei Jing, forcing myself to divert my attention. "Take him away. I shall interrogate him personally. I will correct every single one of these mistakes, bit by bit." The physical constitution of the secret guards was truly astonishing. I only had Pei Jing treated minimally, just enough to keep him conscious enough to speak. And Pei Jing showed not a shred of resistance. I didn't even need to use torture instruments, he told me everything he knew. After Shenxian ascended the throne, he had overheard a conversation between Shenxian and the former consort Lian. By then, Consort Lian had become Empress Dowager Lian. According to her, the world we inhabit is actually a storybook. Empress Dowager Lian came from another realm, knowing everything that unfolds within this narrative, possessing what she called the power of foresight. Her daughter, Xinxian, is the destined female protagonist of this world. And I am the greatest obstacle in the storybook preventing her from ascending the throne as empress. It sounded utterly preposterous, yet it answered every question I'd ever had. Like the token I once gave to Pei Jing. That token was left to me by my elder sister. The crown prince commanded a secret elite force, renowned for their valor and skill in battle. Though only 100 strong, they could stand against 10,000 foes. This elite unit was composed entirely of women, operating under the command of the token. At that time, Xinxian, armed with prior knowledge, repeatedly thwarted my years of preparation. Though I had backup plans, I was merely fighting a losing battle. When I was at my wit's end, I gave the token to Pei Jing, instructing him to lead the elderly, weak, and infirm from my princess's residence to safety first. But I never revealed to Pei Jing the token's true purpose. I had stationed my elite troops along the route they must take. Once they saw the token on Pei Jing, they would naturally protect the people of my residence. I had assumed that after years by my side, Pei Jing must have grown attached to the princess's residence. He would lead my people along that path. Just that stretch of road would suffice. Besides, everyone in the princess's residence treated Pei Jing well. But I miscalculated that one move. Pei Jing gave the token to Xinxian. To others, it was merely an ordinary wooden token. But Xinxian knew how to use it, and she knew how to find the contact point for that elite unit. Though she couldn't command them to act on her orders, she could use the token to order the unit to disband and forbid them from rescuing prisoners. While I was in prison, Xinxian, driven by the pride of her position, gloated to me about the final fate of those soldiers. One by one, their martial arts abilities were crippled. Most took their own lives. The survivors were sold into prostitution. Xinxian truly knew how to enrage me. As I trembled with fury, she gazed at me with that same expression of pitying understanding. As if she had always known she was the heaven-ordained empress, and I was destined to be trampled beneath her heel. Xinjin, I will not tolerate any threat to my existence, not even an infant. I shall become the most exalted woman in this world. No one shall stand above me. Xinxian stood high above all. Though I had strived to disrupt the events of my past life after rebirth, hearing Pei Jing recount them still sent a chill through my veins, making me tremble. Then what about the scars on your body? Pei Jing fell silent. After a long moment, his voice raspy and dry, he replied, "It was Consort Lian. That mother and daughter again." Perhaps it even explained why Wei Ji hadn't been present back then. From the very beginning, these two had manipulated others' lives at will, armed only with their knowledge. I didn't allow Wei Ji to join the interrogation. Even when he resorted to underhanded tactics and every trick in the book, I refused. This life's Wei Ji would never experience the events of the last. So after I didn't take you this time, Xinxian started to panic. I chuckled softly, but I'm curious, since you've also been reborn, why not tell Xinxian all this? After all, many things have changed now. If she loses that foresight ability, she might very well die by my hand. Pei Jing, who had remained composed until now, suddenly grew agitated. He struggled to rise, the chains clanking loudly as he pulled at them. Whether you believe it or not. He gasped heavily, fresh blood seeping from his bandaged wounds. His face twisted in agony and despair. Your Highness, I never intended to kill you. Pei Jing explained that Xinxian's men had always followed him. That night, he'd merely sought to seize the cover of darkness to lead me away. He'd even calculated that the arrow wouldn't take my life. But he hadn't anticipated I'd choose to leap from the cliff. Your Highness can use me. Pei Jing shattered his pride, humbly and timidly offering everything he had, palms upturned, just to earn a shred of mercy. Pain made him curl into a ball as he murmured again, "Please, Your Highness, use me." But Pei Jing, I stood a short distance away, gazing down at him. Each word was deliberate. I do not believe you. Pei Jing froze completely. Whether it's your guilt toward me, your admiration for me, or every single word you've spoken before, I believe none of it. He seemed almost dazed, his body trembling as if from cold. Your Highness doesn't believe me. Indeed. I nodded with a smile, as if I had just plunged a dagger into his flesh and twisted it savagely. I never trust the words of a traitor. And even without you, I could still have Xinxian torn to pieces. I recalled the people from my princess's residence who should have been taken by Pei Jing but were instead handed over to Xinxian. I thought of that elite force originally assembled to resist the corrupt world. I could only suppress the murderous intent in my heart. Pei Jing, you must repay every single one of the 130 lives from my princess's residence, piece by piece. Pei Jing fell silent. He only choked back a sound in his throat. Rest assured, I'll have Xinxian join you very soon. As I turned to leave, Pei Jing suddenly looked up. He asked me, if there were a next life, and your Highness still chose me, and I never betrayed you, there is no next life. I cut Pei Jing off. He gazed at me quietly, finally forcing a pale smile. Yes, I have no next life either. I fought so hard for this chance. I remained silent. Though I know your Highness would never accept it. But in your Highness's mercy, consider this the last plea of a dying man. In the damp, gloomy dungeon, Pei Jing bowed deeply before me, each word spoken as if blood were dripping from his lips. Jing, I wish His Majesty, may his wishes be fulfilled, reigning for 10,000 generations. Upon exiting the dungeon, my first sight was Wei Ji waiting outside with a bowl of medicine. He didn't speak as I approached, merely staring blankly before thrusting the bowl toward me, signaling I should drink the potion. Even before I drew near, I caught the faintest whiff of blood. Taking the bowl, I asked Wei Ji, why did you decide to shave off your precious beard today? Along the way, many cast surprised and peculiar glances at Wei Ji. Though Wei Ji remained silent, I could sense his body stiffen. Yet this simple question alone made him flush bright red. Now unmasked by his beard, his fair, handsome face exploded crimson as if boiled alive. Me? I think I know what that beard was for. Wei Ji cleared his throat lightly, tilting his chin toward the bowl in my hand. Your Highness, drink first. I'll explain after you finish. Since I'd drunk his blood before, I downed it without hesitation. Before I could ask, he volunteered the explanation. The poison within your Highness has accumulated over time. You'll need to drink more of my blood. Of course, the effects vary depending on which part of my body the blood comes from. Something about Wei Ji's words felt off, but before I could protest, he grinned and pointed to his own neck. A case like yours requires frequent nibbles from my neck. I know you're a beauty-conscious person, you'd never bring yourself to bite my old face. As he finished, Wei Ji sighed heavily, adopting an air of profound sacrifice for my sake. This man had always been shameless and brazen, frequently provoking my annoyance before. It seemed he found great amusement in seeing me angry and flustered. But times had changed. I took a half-step back, scrutinizing Wei Ji from head to toe. Only when the smile gradually faded from his face did I nod with genuine seriousness. You do look much more presentable than before. Since you volunteered to share my bed, I'll have someone clean you up and send you to the sleeping quarters shortly. Wei Ji fell silent. But the quiet didn't last long. He grumbled, Your Highness, are you aware of the poison within you? I know. I replied casually. I was not the Empress's biological child, so her wariness toward me was understandable. Just as back then, when the Grand Tutor had merely praised my natural intelligence, she had immediately halted my studies, instructing the maidservants to teach me only the women's admonitions and needlework. This poison wasn't fatal, but its gradual accumulation weakened the body over time. I expected Wei Ji to ask who I was. Instead, he fell silent for a moment before exhaling a sigh of relief. thank goodness I learned an extra skill back then. I glanced at Wei Ji's bandaged hand and thought it was indeed a skilled craft. Your Highness, the man turned back to me with a grin, drink this medicine, and the pain will be gone. Drink it, and the pain will vanish. My footsteps faltered. Then, as Wei Ji halted to ask, I spoke first. Wei Ji, what do you think of Xinxian? Pei Jing said Xinxian is the destined heroine of the storybook world. That explained why so many men fell head over heels for her at first sight, unable to forget her. So Wei Ji, 2 eyes, 1 mouth, Wei Ji pondered earnestly before giving me a definitive answer. If I had to say anything, it's that she smells awful. Xinxian smells awful? I was taken aback. After all, this person soaks in a flower pool for ages before going out. I can't remember people, Your Highness. Wei Ji added, they all look the same to me, but not you, Your Highness. You're the only one I can remember. I recalled long ago, when I first met Wei Ji, how he could clearly recognize the inhabitants of the Cold Palace. So I asked him, is this also a side effect of being a medicated person? Wei Ji fell silent again. He always did this. Probably because he knew he wasn't good at lying. When faced with questions he didn't want to answer, he simply pretended not to hear. I smiled knowingly. Wei Ji. Accompany me to burn incense someday. A few days later, I brought Wei Ji to Bai Ming Temple. Burning incense and paying respects to the Buddha was secondary. My primary purpose was to see my imperial aunt who had long resided in the temple, Princess Jingxian. Since her husband's death, this princess had devoted herself entirely to Buddhism, detached from worldly affairs. Even Xinxian and her daughter knew little about her. She was the greatest variable. And what I needed most was precisely that variable. As expected, Princess Jingxian refused my request for an audience. So I waited day after day. It wasn't until rumors spread throughout the capital that the third princess was scandalously parading her male consort through the sacred grounds of the temple that the princess finally relented. Yet she granted me only half a cup of tea's time. I had heard countless tales of this princess's heroic deeds. Among them, the most legendary was her charge onto the battlefield wielding a silver spear, her heroic figure repelling the Turkic tribes. She was no less formidable than any imperial prince. Yet now, this high princess wore plain robes, her very countenance tinged with a monastic serenity. Upon seeing me, Princess Jingxian merely invited me to drink tea before declaring, "Heaven's will cannot be defied. Your Imperial Highness, you don't know me. I'm a stubborn one." I rose to pour her tea. The princess's small courtyard was modest. Looking up, one could only see a square patch of sky. So I smiled and told her, "But I'm determined to defy heaven. I will break the square sky for all the women of the realm." I had expected to spend a great deal of effort persuading my aunt. Yet, after hearing my words, she merely pondered for a moment before nodding in agreement. I was somewhat taken aback. "Are you not afraid I might be deceiving you?" "It is not that I do not believe you." Princess Jingxian looked at me, yet her gaze seemed to pierce through me, seeing others beyond. Her expression remained serene. "I simply trust the child taught personally by Aizhu." Aizhu. Hearing my elder sister's name after so long left me momentarily stunned. Back when I was confined to a small courtyard, diligently studying the women's code, it was Aizhu who personally instructed me. She told me, "Xinxian is no less than any man." It was she who taught me, "Hide your sharp edges until your wings are fully grown." She also told me, "This world is hard for women. Xinxian, if there's any chance, I will do everything in my power to change this. This path is difficult. I failed, Aji failed, and you may not succeed either." The eldest princess's tone was earnest, even stern. "Even so, are you determined to walk this path?" "I must try." After Xinxian ascended the throne in my past life, the world remained unchanged. Women were still confined to the roles of wife and mother, subservient to men. What Xinxian truly desired, from the very beginning, was to reign supreme alone. And so, for the first time, this stern and dignified elder smiled gently at me. She said, "At least you're not alone on this path. That's far better than the two of us." Following her gaze, I saw Wei Ji teasing a young monk in the temple. "Indeed," I replied, my eyes crinkling with a smile. "My fortune has always been favorable." The eldest princess fought valiantly in battle, yet her own brother betrothed her to a coward, bestowing upon her the title Jingxian. My elder sister possessed the talent to govern, yet even her own mother doubted a woman could become a wise ruler. But I met Wei Ji. I once confessed my ambitions to Wei Ji. It was a bold move. But because it was Wei Ji, I was willing to believe once more. After hearing me out, he merely sighed deeply and said, "Your path, Your Highness, will be a difficult one. Having chosen this path, I have long considered every consequence. Should I prevail, when dynasties shift in the future, women may dare to contend with men." At that moment, I sat in a tree, gazing toward the distant horizon beyond the palace walls. Wei Ji stood beneath the tree, arms outstretched. He said he was guarding against my fall, ready to catch me should I slip. And if I fail? Defeat? It's merely a case of slander eroding one's reputation. I can endure the temporary scorn. If history records me with eternal infamy, I can bear that too. By then, I'll be nothing but a handful of dust. If people occasionally curse my name, it only spreads the truth further. Perhaps someone might glimpse a sliver of my true intentions. TSK. I'd call that a golden opportunity. Wei Ji pondered for a moment, then gave me a thumbs up. That's bold. Wei Ji. I never think I'll lose. I grinned and leaped down from the tree, landing securely in Wei Ji's arms. Wei Ji was right, that position might have looked awkward, but it let him catch me just in time. Wrapping my arms around his neck, I told him, "As long as one woman steps forward, that's my victory." "That's fine," Wei Ji said, freeing one hand to block my mischief. He glared at me before breaking into a smile. "It's nothing. Your path is yours, and mine is mine." Something felt off about Wei Ji's words. They made me uneasy. So I jumped down from him, then twisted his soft flesh at the waist hard, demanding fiercely, "Then where's your path?" He withdrew his gaze from the distance, finally settling on me. The baby-faced little shadow guard grinned, revealing a mouthful of pearly whites. His amber eyes brimmed with laughter, sparkling in the setting sun. He said, "It lies ahead of your Highness. I will clear all obstacles from the young prince's path ahead. So, young prince, you need not fear. Just walk forward boldly." I understood Wei Ji's words. From that day on, whether the road ahead was smooth or rugged, I no longer feared. In the 15th year of Shenqing, the new crown prince passed away. The empress, overcome with grief, secluded herself in the inner palace. The following year, Emperor Xuanzong became obsessed with immortality practices, neglecting state affairs. Princess Jingxian emerged from Beiming Temple and gently urged the emperor to reform, only to be confined by palace guards, provoking the minister's anger. In the 17th year of Shenqing, imperial princes fought amongst themselves while disaster struck across the land. That same year, 7th Princess Xinxian presented a treatise on water conservancy and proposed new farming methods, resolving the famine in the north. The emperor was delighted and bestowed great rewards upon the 7th princess. However, the following year, the rainy season caused levees to burst, rendering the strategy ineffective and the planting methods unworkable. The court launched massive water conservancy projects, exhausting the people and depleting the treasury, leading to widespread public discontent. Rebellions erupted across the land, demanding the removal of corrupt officials and the establishment of a new dynasty, threatening the capital. Emperor Xuanzong, terrified, fled hastily with consort Lian and the 7th princess to the imperial retreat. In this critical hour, the 3rd Princess Xinxian and the eldest Princess Jingxian personally led troops to suppress the rebels. Among their forces was an elite unit of female warriors, invincible in battle and unmatched by 10,000 men. They later escorted Emperor Xuanzong back to the imperial retreat. In the 20th year of Shenqing, Princess Xinjin was proclaimed crown princess. The court erupted in uproar. The crown princess quelled dissent with thunderous force, supported by Princess Jingxian and the newly appointed Grand General. In the 22nd year of Shenqing, Crown Princess Xinjin ascended the throne, changing the era name to Yongyan. Subsequently, the empress gradually established schools for women, employed female merchants, and permitted women to enter the court as officials. From that point onward, the political situation stabilized. On the eve of her coronation, I went to see Xinxian. How is this possible? I succeeded before, so why are there so many variables with you? Xinxian glared at me with hatred, yet dared not approach. She still couldn't believe she'd lost to me, yet she feared my methods. I looked down on her from above. Consort Lian was already dead. She hadn't been particularly capable, she'd only relied on those past premonitions. But now, they were all useless. Plotting against two crown princes was a capital offense. Xinxian, however, could not die. Perhaps because of her status as the heaven-ordained heroine, no one could harm her in the slightest. Except Wei Ji. But I didn't want Wei Ji's hands stained with Xinxian's blood, so I imprisoned her in the dungeon. At first, Xinxian still believed someone would come to rescue her. So I would occasionally bring Wei Ji down to the dungeon for a walk. Later, she grew afraid. Kneeling, she begged me, her voice bordering on madness, "Third Imperial Sister, Third Imperial Sister. You vowed to save all women in this realm. I am one of those women. Why won't you spare me? You are mistaken." I pulled at my own robe and told Xinxian, "Those I seek to save are the women adrift in this world, as fragile as floating duckweed. I seek to save the women who disguise themselves as men to enter military camps, who fight bravely on the battlefield, yet are hated and framed to death by their comrades simply because they are women. I seek to save the women who have done no wrong, yet are oppressed by the powerful and privileged because of their beauty, humiliated to death in public. Xinxian, they are not like you. Of course they're different." Xinxian roared at me. "Their lowly status means they deserve such setbacks. This is how the world is, this is how it is. That's precisely why I must change this world. If this world is harsh on women, then I will vindicate them." I did not continue the argument with Xinxian. Pei Jing was here too. That's why Xinxian couldn't even kill herself. "I won't let you die." I glanced at the taciturn Pei Jing, then leaned slightly forward, staring into Xinxian's eyes. Each word was deliberate. "You must live. Live for 10 years, 100 years. And never find peace." When I stepped outside, the sun blazed overhead. Wei Ji was waiting outside. Seeing me emerge unharmed, he finally exhaled a slight sigh of relief. "Were you worried I'd be charmed by Pei Jing again?" In previous years when I visited the dungeon, this man insisted on accompanying me. Once inside, he wouldn't wander about, he'd just block Pei Jing's path to prevent me from seeing him. Am I that petty? Wei Ji snorted coldly. But after holding back for a few seconds, he couldn't resist. "I went in to take a look the other day. That Pei Jing is truly hideous beyond words now." Wei Ji deliberately emphasized those 4 words, shaking his head and swaying his body, looking smug. "Not only is he hideous beyond words, but even his physique isn't half as sturdy as yours." I nodded in agreement. Wei Ji glanced at me, hesitating to speak. "What is it?" I stopped and asked him. He looked around cautiously, then leaped before me, spreading his arms wide. In a hushed whisper, he said, "If your Highness is craving my body now, just give me a little nibble, Wei Ji." "Huh?" Seeing my stern expression, Wei Ji gave a crisp reply and fell silent. But soon, he pouted, "Your Highness has been getting angrier with me lately. Yet just last night, you praised my extraordinary looks." he muttered under his breath. Seeing him getting more and more ridiculous, I interrupted. Have you finished the sword tassel I asked you to make? I carved the wooden sword, Wei Ji wove the tassel, our roles were clear. Yet while my sword was long complete, this man lingered lazily, refusing to start. Until today, of course it's done, he declared, demanding his reward with righteous indignation. But your highness must grant me one request. What is it? I asked for. Wei Ji pulled a crimson sword tassel from his robe and placed it in my palm, speaking each word with utmost sincerity. May your highness enjoy peace and prosperity, free from all worries. Then I shall wish your highness peace and prosperity. Just as in those days within the cold palace, when that little eunuch and I conversed through a cold stone wall all night long. After my failed coup, I was clearly a man marked for death. Yet that little eunuch stubbornly insisted on wishing me peace and prosperity. On protecting my peace and prosperity. And he did just that. On the battlefield, before the Qingqian palace. He parried warriors' blades, blocked the ink-slinging of the pen. There was always someone who would smile and tell me, Your Highness, do not fear. I am still here. You, just walk forward boldly, don't look back. My young prince, you shall surely be celebrated for ages. I slowly tightened my palm, gripping the sword tassel firmly in my hand. Eyes crinkling, all right. From then on, peace and good fortune accompanied me year after year. The story ends here. Thank you for watching. The next chapter will be even more exciting.